If you think women were historically weak and passive, you're about to discover how wrong that assumption is. Archaeological evidence reveals that prehistoric women had bone density and arm strength comparable to today's elite female athletes. Viking warrior graves, once assumed to be male, have been confirmed female. And the delicate flower narrative you've been told about women throughout history is a complete fabrication. Today, my guest reveals the lost history of women's strength and why reclaiming this power isn't just about looking good, it's about surviving and thriving in midlife and beyond. You'll discover why your female ancestors would outperform most modern women in strength tests, how perimenopause actually creates opportunities for building muscle, and specific training approaches that work best with female physiology. Stop believing the lie that women are naturally weak when the evidence proves women are built for physical power. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the show that helps you build a strong, healthy physique using evidence, engineering, and efficiency. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and today I'm excited because we're challenging what you think you know about women and strength throughout history and even modern times, because my guest is Anne Marie Chaker, a former Wall Street journalist who made a quite dramatic career pivot to become a competitive bodybuilder at 50. She's the author of Lift, How Women Can Reclaim Their Physical Power and Transform Their Lives. We're definitely going to link you guys to that in that book, and we're going to play on that in today's interview. She combines evolutionary biology, archaeological evidence, sport, science, culture to reveal how women have been, I'll say, systematically conditioned to believe they're naturally weak when the opposite is quite true. And today you're going to learn why prehistoric women had strength levels that would potentially shame modern athletes, the cultural narratives that have stripped women of their physical identity and how those have evolved, the specific ways that women over 40 can reclaim their evolutionary advantage through intelligent training, which we're all about here. Whether you're a woman looking to build strength or anyone interested in nerding out on the intersection of history and biology and performance, today's episode is going to change how you view women's physical capability. Anne Marie, hope I got all that right. I'm very excited to get into this with you, and welcome to the show.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I want to really start from the historical lens. I don't know if we can make this a chronological story, but your book Lift challenges all of these assumptions about gender and physical capability, that women throughout history have been weaker, or there's certain, views that we have on them culturally based on recent history, especially like the Victorian age and all of that, and that they're maybe less involved physically than men throughout history. But your research, I think, suggests quite the opposite. So when you look back at the majority of our history, first of all, what was expected of women? What's the reality there? What was expected of women in terms of strength?
So this book was really born of my own experience, Philip, when I, was in my 40s and life had hit kind of a tough patch. I, through happenstance, kind of entered this weird, wild world of weightlifters and bodybuilders, and kind of weightlifting had changed my life, right? So it was like the world was black and white, and then it was technicolor. Everything, once I started working with this coach and lifting weight, my body was transforming, but it was also my mind started transforming. And so, had more confidence. I, would come back to my desk after a good lift, and I would, I could hear it in my voice. I was wearing lipstick again, like everything, like I just felt like a new person. And so the journalist in me really wanted to understand, well, where has this been my whole life? Like my entire life, I was chasing skinny, right? Always this feeling like I had to lose weight. If I did, it wasn't ever enough. And like I had to be thin. And it's like the message that is ingrained in our heads from the moment we were born. And suddenly embracing kind of the moreness of muscle and the idea of building oneself kind of radically transformed my life in every which way. So the journalist in me really wanted to understand, why the heck have we been, chasing this thing when this other thing is clearly the answer? And I became enamored of, I started, kind of researching the history of the thin ideal and where the heck this came from. And I kept coming back to this study out of Cambridge. This professor kind of realized, like, how come, early bones of women are always being compared to men, but we never compare them to how modern women's bone structure looks. So what if we took Neolithic and Paleolithic women's bone skeleton and compared them to a sample of modern women. So she looked at a sample of different modern students at Cambridge University, more sedentary students, athletes, and she found that the early women's bones were about the size of the elite rowers with their big developed kind of upper bodies. So this blew her mind and blew my mind too, because it said these early women were buff. They were lifting heavy things. They weren't sitting around wondering, like, how do I get thinner? They were, an integral part of agriculture. It wasn't like, this hunter-gatherer myth where like the men are doing all the work and they're hunting and they're doing all the things and the women are picking berries in the field. No, the women were working hard. So this to me said that this is the OG body. This is the body that women are intended to have and that we perform best at. And that was why, to me, as an athlete who was lifting heavy things, and of course I was working, doing much better in every which way. So it kind of went from there. Like if I was experiencing this, if I was like kind of coming home to this body that I felt like I was always supposed to have, I wanted other women to kind of experience this as well.
That the story about looking into the why and history, right? It reminds me of Jen Todd, right? Jen Todd, who is a pioneer in powerlifting for women. She kind of founded many of the academic, I think she even still edits a journal, and I forget which university she went to, but anyway, it reminds me of that, of looking back and saying, we make all these assumptions about how women were acting in society. You mentioned the gathering versus the hunting. Are there particular points in our culture's history? Do you have to go back to prehistory, or is there, during post-agriculture and civilized time, I guess, where we see this? Because I'm just really curious what they were doing to get those massive rower density bodies.
It's interesting because we look at things through this modern lens of, how women are supposed, how men behaved and how women were, we think we have so many cultural touchbook fairy tales and, marketing message on cracker boxes and, all kinds of things. There was another thing that I found, which blew my mind, which was this Viking grave in Birka, Sweden, that was discovered. And in the grave was this great warrior, clearly a leader, buried with the horse and chess pieces that showed that this was a leader who was thinking about strategy. Clearly the grave of a great leader. For eons, it was assumed that this was, I think the grave was found in, could be wrong here, but I think it was like 1917. And so for many, many years, it was assumed that this was a male. And it wasn't until just a few years ago very recently that it was found that this warrior had 2 X chromosomes. It was a woman. And how interesting is that? I mean, if I found I would have assumed it was a man too, right? But it's like only in modern times, really, it's really the idea that men are the stronger sex is really the product of the last 150 or so years. And I would argue, it's something that has benefited a patriarchy run by men. If we keep women in a more childlike, controlled, weaker state, that benefits a world run by men. And we see this take place most sharply at certain times where women really gain more power and influence. So, for instance, when women won the right to vote in the 1920s, what did we have? We suddenly had the flapper was the look where, suddenly thin was in a big, big way. This reared its head again. For instance, we saw it in the 80s when women suddenly were infiltrating boardrooms and the corporate world. And we had the power suit with the big shoulder pads. Suddenly we had Kate Moss. And, so there are moments where, you see the skinny thing rise most sharply when women start to show an inkling of more power. So, I could go on and on about this, but it's not just one thing that, caused skinny to be. There were many things from, food supply and demand. We want to emulate wealth, right? Well, when food became more plentiful, more people had access to the stuff. So, the pendulum started to swing more towards thinness and, the dawn of the calorie and the obsession of measuring it and all of these different things kind of fueling the flames of, but at its core, I think, really the skinny obsession is really a product of control and keeping women in a weaker state, which has never benefited us.
Yeah, I mean, I love strong women. My wife lifts weights. We're talking about that a lot. And of course, I suppose I'm the last person who can talk about patriarchy being a man myself, so I'm not going to go there. But I could see that in history. I think it's important to understand history and why certain moments and landmarks had shifted the narrative, right? Like the Victorian frailty, where were our ancestors from 10,000 years ago and how they lived versus 1,000 years ago in the Middle Ages and the Vikings versus the Victorian age. And so I suppose you tell me if this is true or not. Are we in a new renaissance now? Because I think we're talking more about it. I think there's more acceptance for strong and being fueled. And I hear it, but I also hear just as strong some of the terrible messaging that has hung on since the 80s that gets amplified on social media, especially to younger girls with how the algorithms work and things like that. So what are your thoughts? Like, what period are we in now in terms of women's strength?
It's such a great question. And I have so many feelings and so many thoughts, as the mother of a 14-year-old girl who's just recently discovered TikTok. I was just sitting on a bus next to her and literally watching her for hours scroll through my phone and look at TikTok. And so it was really kind of fascinating study on, what she's seeing and what message. And let me tell you, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. There's this whole skinny obsession rearing its head again. And I mean, and on the other hand, I go to a gym and I see we're starting to see many more women. And when I started my journey, I started hitting the weight room. And I would say 2018, 2019, I was really one of the only women in the weight room. It was largely 18, 19, 20-year-old young men. I was kind of the grandma. Now, I think, the influencers, gymfluencers, as they call them, we're seeing a lot more women in the weight room, which is wonderful. And they know what they're doing. It's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Like they go and they know what to do. They've watched the video, and they go with friends and so forth. So, and of course, GLP-1s now again. So there's different things going on. And I think it's all kind of shaking out. There was one, I don't know if you remember in my book, a study of Miss Americas from, 50 years ago to now. And it was this researcher who kind of noted that, we're starting to see more of a skinny, muscular ideal, which also isn't good, because that's not healthy either. And it's an ideal that's even more impossible to reach. So I think there's a lot of mixed, confusing messages going on. And I don't think the skinny thing is going away anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you talked about that on a recent Substack article.
Yes.
We'll link that for folks. You've got a lot of really cool articles there, some cross-posted as well with other folks that you collaborate with. But that skinny, muscular, I think you were talking about an actress in particular, but it makes me think of, from the male perspective, how Fight Club became like a landmark for the new physique of super skinny, not even shredded and muscular, just kind of gaunt and skinny, right? Like with the six pack, and why those things are so powerful, why they take control with these huge. And so I always think, I don't know what you think, is that if you're different, if you're weird and you're the minority, you're probably doing the right thing in any given part of society. So if we're to elevate this for folks listening, and by the way, a lot of our listeners, they're into lifting, they want to know about this. We're trying to get the message out about, if you want to lose fat, that's fine, but it's not about weight. It's not about scale weight. It's not about being skinny. It's about fueling yourself and being healthy and performing. Who are your favorite athletes today that would exemplify that? Or, to not put you on the spot, like, what people should look for when they're trying to follow individuals on social media or podcasts or whatnot to get the right messaging into their feed?
Well, I don't know that this is revolutionary or anything, but I've been really taken with Alana Marr. I think, her Instagram is just a masterclass. I think she works with her sister on it. I could be wrong. It's just like she's funny and she's brave, and she talks about her body is unbelievable. She's big and she's unabashedly strong. And she talks about how she feels, and she's honest. Like sometimes like she feels not so good. And like she worried, like it's just a very honest, funny and brave social media account. And it represents kind of the best of what social media should be, which is just honest. And she's very body positive. She's strong and she's proud of her strong body. And she eats, like there was one where she was biting into a donut the other day and she was just like, I am enjoying a jelly filled donut. And it was just like, it was just so funny. And you just wanted to eat the donut with her and hash it out. But, you know, trying to think of other athletes that none come to mind.
No, it's okay. And that's Alana Mar with an I, right? Alana Mar with an I.
Yeah.
The Mar, exactly. Yeah, she's Olympic medalist. Definitely check her out. I gave her a follow as well. Have you heard of Jessica Bittner?
That name rings a bell.
Canadian forklift. She's a power lifter in Canada. Super strong. So yeah, I was just curious, right? Because I think you have a 14-year-old daughter. I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And they actually don't have cell phones yet.
No, neither do mine. They play with mine, which is a constant battle.
And no judgment on anybody. I'm just saying like that kind of wholesale takes an element out of the equation. But I am also, concerned about that. Like, how do you get educated yourself when you're raising your children, your daughters, to when they see that information to have the right judgment on that and critical thinking skills around that, right? Because we can't control everything once they grow up. They're going to be exposed to all that. So what do they do? So that's just kind of where all this is coming from.
It's amazing what they absorb. I haven't done much with TikTok, but I was like, this is what you guys are interested in. And you're seeing these little gym video. Let's do some together. So we started just a couple weeks ago. I started taking little videos in the basement here where I keep my weights and stuff with mother-daughter nonsense, workouts and stuff. And it's funny. My little one who's 10, she said I was doing a bench press with her squatting behind me and we had the cell phone camera on and she goes, all about the bulk. And I was just like, where do you know this? Like it's like they pick up on stuff that they see on TikTok. So anyway.
Well, it's funny you mentioned bulk, right? Because the language we use is important too, right? Because you hear still fears about bulking and getting big and being muscular and or the other terms like being tone and being lean and all that. Right. It's like trying to define all that or dispel what it all means. You're all about, from what I understand, fueling yourself and performing. And so what I'm curious about, being a bodybuilder, 50, awesome. This is like you're prepping for your first show, right?
No, I've done shows before. This is,
okay.
I'm in prep for my first pro show.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So what is that? Obviously bodybuilding itself does come with certain extremes. We've talked about that on the show in terms of like when you have to lean out ready for the show, but in terms of the building and the improvement season, what does that look like for you? What is the everyday person who doesn't even want to compete, who's a woman? What are the general principles they should be trying to incorporate when they go down this journey of strength and health?
Yeah, I would say it really reframed my feelings about food as something to like, oh my God, avoid, guilt, as like something to embrace and to really eat more quantities of like whole and plentiful food. And that doesn't mean it's a great big free for all. But I would say that I prepare my own food ahead of time to ensure that I'm eating really well. And that sort of approach of preparing ahead of time and meal prep, which is like a term you hear a lot now with social media, but prepping your food ahead of time has been the big game changer for me. In the past, I would eat when I got hungry, and I would eat when I got hungry, or I would come home from work and it was like, oh shit, there's nothing in the fridge. Takeout menus. There was it was always like feeding myself was like a last minute thing when I got hungry. And then of course you're not going to make great choices. You're just kind of going to eat what's easy, quick, or yummy. So now I have a much more, bodybuilders think in terms of macronutrients. So that's how I categorize my food. Mm-hmm. I think the big three are carbs, proteins, and fats. And basically, I do like a big shop on Sunday. I'm a big Aldi's shopper. I love Aldi's. It's cheap and it's quick and it's everything you need and it's no frills. I save so much money shopping at Aldi's. And by the way, I'm not like I don't get any money from Aldi.
This episode sponsored by
Aldi.
No.
This is not a sponsor by Aldi.
Maybe I should reach out to them and get a sponsorship.
I know. But so anyway, Sunday, big shop at Aldi's, come home. I always make a ginormous big green salad. And that's like the thing I keep in the fridge. And I pull from that all the time. I make a pot of boiled potatoes, either sweet or white. It doesn't matter. And or white rice. I love white rice. So those things are always like, those are my ready to go carbs. And then proteins, I eat things that the rest of the crew will like also. So I'm not cooking meals for different meals for everyone. So grilled chicken, I buy those chicken tenderloins, throw those on the grill. Those last a couple days. Everybody eats those. I do something I always call a turkey crumbles, which is a pack of 93% and 99% turkey mixed together with a pack of taco seasoning. That's awesome. I eat that on salad. I eat that with potato. Kids eat that with tacos. Like that is gold. And then liquid egg whites are like the mother's milk of bodybuilders. That I consume that in a smoothie. That is like gold for my mid-afternoon smoothie. I usually combine that with some banana or berries, maybe a spoonful of peanut butter if I need fats, banana, but liquid egg whites is always. And yeah, like I eat pretty basic, but it's good food and it's satiating. And I really like protein. Anyway, I like meat and fish.
Yeah, no, we're all about protein and carbs. So I love, I would be hungry if I didn't just have lunch. So it sounds so good. But I do want to give the audience some takeaways, right? Because we talk about macros and tracking and all that, but there are some simple things that you just mentioned that are timeless. They're principles. They're things that will make your decision fatigue way lower when you get to, prepping your dinner for the kids and your family, and you get home and you don't have much time. You don't go for the Chinese takeout. And that is, two things you mentioned. One, doing things ahead of time, prepping ahead of time, reducing decision from the week. And of course, that could be extrapolated to anything, to preparing what you're going to eat, to the grocery shopping you do on Sunday, to having a meal plan, whether it's a loose mix and match or more, firm, depending on what your preference is, right? And you mentioned very simple, but like great choices for foods that are high in satiety, high in fiber, right? The potatoes, for example, are underrated source of staying full. People don't realize. And then all the beautiful, the egg whites, actually, that's another underrated thing because people talk about whey protein. And that one is really good.
So underrated. Yeah. I mean, you don't even need whey protein if you're using liquid egg whites. I think a lot of people get grossed out by the idea of the egg. And like, I always get like, don't you have to cook them? And you don't. They're pasteurized, so you can consume that. And like, they're totally flavorless. So once you get past the mental block of them being eggs, it's totally flavorless and fine.
Yeah, agree. And you can mix it in with whole eggs as well and diet, increase the protein density.
Yeah.
And you said one other thing about reframing around food, about it not being a big free for all. And it reminded me of, I think I'm going to do a podcast about this. Lyle McDonald wrote an article years ago called Excluding the Middle. And it's basically the false dichotomy where, and this is big on social media, right? Where it's like, well, over here you've got the all Pop-Tart diet. And then over here you've got the all clean and like super boring bodybuilder diet. And like you said, and you mentioned Ilana Mar eating the donut, there's room for it all. Don't assume this false dichotomy, but you have to have structure. You have to have planning, right? Is that right. The message here?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's really kind of like, that continues to be like my challenge is like, finding I love the way actually you put it, is the structure, having the structure as the backbone and allowing yourself a life, but always kind of coming back to the backbone of right now, for instance, I'm in prep and I'm like weeks before competition. So I'm really careful and
dialed in.
I'm really dialed in. But when the competition season is over, I'm still tracking, macros and making sure I'm like hitting my protein and allowing myself, I don't like the term cheat days because I feel like, but but I, go on a date night allow myself a date night with my husband where we drink wine and have like a wonderful meal. And that is totally awesome and cool. It's not every night because then it wouldn't be special, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, a date night or like if I'm, my kid is having a birthday, like I'll enjoy birthday cake because it's birthday cake. It's my kid.
Mm-hmm.
It's life. So it's not like it's not like it just because you're a bodybuilder doesn't mean like you're negating everything. It's within a framework and allowing yourself, the times to enjoy the special things, which is important. And
Very important. Yep. Yeah.
And that's life and they're special. So.
Yeah. And so I don't know how natural this segue will be, but because we're talking about bodybuilding and also mentioned your age, the natural question is, okay, perimenopause, menopause, hormones, hot topic today.
Mm-hmm.
We've touched on it on this show, talking about, some of the chain acceleration in muscle mass. And obviously it's very different from one woman to the next as to how they're going to respond and whether HRT is in the mix and all this other stuff. I think the listener wants to know, like, that phase of life, does it present certain challenges for some women that they need to work around with their lifestyle, with their training, with their food? Because I know what a lot of women tell me is, I'm trying to lose weight and I'm having trouble doing that. And it becomes a weight loss discussion as opposed to maybe a building or muscle discussion. Where do you stand on all of that? What should be the first focus for someone in that age range? What are your thoughts on all of that? The perimenopause, training, lifestyle, all of that?
Yeah, no, it hit me. I kind of had this idea of like menopause, like, like, I don't know. It was like for those people, like, and so when I started feeling these symptoms, I would say about a year ago. And I thought a hot flash was like, oh Lord, I'm hot. No, it didn't feel that way to me at all. It was like a prickly sensation. And I thought I was having a panic attack. Like that's what it felt like to me, like prickly, like anxiety. So I didn't associate it at all with menopause. But then it started happening with some frequency. And I had this like really bizarre road rage incident with this other driver, and which was very unlike me. So I remember coming home and Googling like road rage and menopause, and like turns out like rage is a thing during, and then like I realized like the prickly feelings, and then I was having other symptoms. And so yes, menopause is real. And I found some relief I take an estrogen patch, and that has helped a lot. But it's funny, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal about how like certain phases in your life where you age more, and like for men it's like between, I don't know, I don't remember, it was like between 43 and 44, and like for women it was like between and it's just like I just feel like the last year has been like suddenly like I have hit kind of like I have aged more, and I've felt it at the gym. Like I feel like my body feels different. Like like I've aged. So I don't know. It's kind of exciting this competition season because I'll see how things shake out. Like, I no longer, like in the past, I used to be really competitive against other people. Like I used to really want to win and kick butt. And, this time around, I'm more interested in like myself. Like I still want to win and do well, but I'm more interested in like how I'm going to look compared to the last time I stepped on stage, and kind of no, but I'm feeling pretty good. But it does feel like, I will say 50 feels different than the last time I competed, which was, I was 48 and a half.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. Yeah. It sounds like a very healthy perspective of competing with yourself, right? Because one of the common questions I get is like, how strong should I be for my age? Or how big should my muscles be for my age? Or how, whatever. I'm like, the best standard is yourself. Like, where were you last year or last month, or what are you trying to improve in, and compare yourself to that. But let's dig one level deeper though on the whole menopause thing, because when I had Holly Baxter on the show and I asked her the very first question, like, what are most women not doing or should do that they're not doing? She said, just building muscle, like whether it's in a calorie surplus or not, building muscle, right? In general. So what are your thoughts on, because we have the skinny culture, because we have the obsession with weight loss, because women in peri-post-menopause, I mean, really everybody as we age, we hit these age markers that you mentioned, and things start to change, as well as we've had a certain lifestyle for like 20 years, 30 years, that is, I guess, catching up to us, if you will. like, where should someone start? Where should a woman listening here say, wow, Anne Marie, that's awesome what you're doing. I don't think I'm going to be in a show next year necessarily, but I want to get healthier. What's the first step?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, a couple things. You can decide whether you want to do this at home or join the gym. My feeling is I like having both options. It doesn't take a lot to have a couple things at home on days where you can't make it to the gym. Go to a corner of your house. If you have a couple pairs of dumbbells, maybe a band, you actually get a good workout done. The beauty of the gym is it's nice to get out. It's nice to see other people. You might make a couple friends, and you have space to kind of spread out. There's more stuff. So I really enjoy going to a gym and kind of seeing the familiar faces and kind of high-fiving my pals that I see there. And benefit of gym too is if you join, like, you'll get a freebie session or two with a personal trainer. So really work them push them to give you kind of a plan to start. But really, like, if you're doing some kind of weight training 3 times a week, give it 30 minutes 3 times a week. I sort of feel like most people can do that. And when I say 30 minutes, like, the other day somebody said, all you need is 30 minutes. It's like, yes, but make it 30 minutes where you're not like looking at your phone or staring at the wall or thinking about something else. Like, really make it that, like, I'm going to give myself 30 minutes and I'm going to be out the door. And I'm going to do these 3 or 4 exercises, 3 sets of 10, and like get it done. But yeah, we're all guilty of getting distracted or looking at our phone and wasting time. But like, if you make it efficient, you're likelier to, come back again and again and stay on top of it, I feel like.
Yeah, we're all about efficiency because that's one of the biggest excuses to consistency is the time. And I like how you mentioned make it count, right? I was listening to, I think, Dr. Mike Israel talking about training hard, and people will say, well, I'm in the gym, 7 days a week, bro. And, I'm hit. But of course, you're on your phone, you're doing maybe one set, you're not training with relative, you're at like 5 or 6 reps shy of failure. You're not training hard, but if you could those 30 minutes, like you said, 3, 4 exercises, which I look at your content and it's what I would expect for somebody who knows how to lift. It's a lot of compound lifts and variations on those and a little bit of accessory work in there because obviously you're a bodybuilder working on your physique. What are those 3 to 4 exercises in general for a new lifter?
So I am a big fan of, I love the squat. So having a barbell at home, I think, is a good thing. You can also do with just dumbbells, but the squat, the deadlift, the chest press, pull up. Those are kind of like my meat and potatoes that I think of. And then from there, then you can talk about rows or other push exercises, push-ups, and, kind of work from there. But those really lead my workout, the hip thrust, those lead the beginning of every one of my workouts. And, from there, the accessory work is really done at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'd like to give a big shout out to my nutrition coach, Philip. With his coaching, I have lost 17 pounds. He helped me identify the reason that I wanted to lose weight, and it's very simple: longevity. I want to be healthy, active, and independent until the day I die. He introduced me to this wonderful little app called Macro Factor. I got that part of my nutrition figured out. Along with that is the movement part of nutrition. There's a plan to it, and he really helped me with that. The other thing he helped me with was knowing that I need to get a lot of steps in. So the more steps you have, the higher your expenditure is, and the easier it is to lose weight. When it's presented to you like he presents it, it makes even more sense. And the other thing that he had was a hunger guide, and that really helped me. So thank you, Philip.
I still hear a lot of people wanting to do the circuit YouTube workouts, and no judgment. I mean, there's specific trainers and workouts that are very effective, but there is a culture, correct me if I'm wrong, where especially I see it with women, they want to do these kind of follow along circuit style, not very much rest. What are your thoughts on those types of workouts? Can they be effective or not?
I think, we've been conditioned to think of exercise as like cardio, right? That you have to like end it in a breathless state of like puddle of sweat and want to die in the middle of the floor. And, none of my workouts looks like that. I hit an 8 on the scale of 1 to 10 of the RPE. rate of perceived exertion. The name of the game is to fatigue the muscle. If you're fatiguing the muscle, then you're doing it right. And you know your body. You know when you hit that point. You know what an 8 is on a scale from 1 to 10. And then, you keep doing that. You keep lifting heavy things and hitting that 8. And that's what, I'm fatiguing, but in a good way. And I finish and I don't feel like I'm dead. I feel like I've put in a good lift and I can move on with my day. And then I am likely to do that again and again and again consistently. That's the thing. None of my workouts is like kill yourself material. It's like, it's a good lift and I do it consistently. And
yeah,
that's it. That's not sexy, but that's what it is.
I mean, you hit on at least 3 principles that are important. One, you mentioned the 8 RPE over and over again, which for anybody who's thinking about that would realize and understand strength, that means you're actually going to get stronger over time, because to be able to hit that 8 the next time in the gym, you've adapted and you've gotten stronger, right?
Right.
That's a great approach to training. What I want to do is connect that to a little bit back to the history again, maybe over the last, century or so, when we think of the culture of women in powerlifting, which was kind of non-existent until, 60s, 70s. You tell me, I'm not sure when women powerlifters even existed. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Women powerlifters. So there's a chapter in the book where I looked at strong women over time, starting with kind of even the term strong women. We looked like in the 1890s. They were, circus performers. They were, they were anomalies. They were almost like the bearded woman, like, oh, the woman with the muscles who's like lifting the dumbbell, so there was that. And then over time, there were like these flickers, moments of women athletes. There, like the roller derby, it was this whole thing, like the sport in the 1940s and 50s where like women were, pushing and shoving each other around, and they were, on roller skates, and they were stars and people knew their names, and they were on television. And, for whatever reason that kind of fell out. There was the Queen of Muscle Beach, Pudgy Stockton. She was, the first woman to wear a 2-piece bathing suit. And, she kind of like was the starlet in Hollywood of Muscle Beach. And she was kind of the first female body. So, yeah. So like over time, then what else did I write about? The women of Glow, the women wrestlers Glow, yes. In the 80s. That's right. And then the dawn of, female bodybuilders around that time. So, yeah.
That show Glow is good too. If you haven't seen it with Mark Maron.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering about that, because again, we keep tying it back to culture and identity. And I mentioned Jen Todd because she was just in the local newspaper for some reason talking about lifting the Dinnie stones over in Scotland. I hope I got that right. And the identity and psychology thing is important, right? Because here you were a journalist. Maybe we could talk about, did you not lift until, when did you start lifting? How old were you?
So it's funny, growing up, the first time I really hit a weight room was when I rode crew in college for a time. And that was the first time that like the weight room had come to, and I loved it. I felt like very at home and comfortable in it. And I could see changes happening in my physique. And then that just kind of disappeared once I, graduated from college, like started life, growing up, working, having a boss, paying off student loans, like that space in my life was gone. And suddenly like everything exercise related was about like, losing weight and, or yoga or Pilates or things that like I wasn't interested in. So this was a different time, but the weight room wasn't something that like I had come back to for decades. So when I started with my coach again, when I, in my 40s, it just felt like this wonderful homecoming. It's like, oh God, I remember this stuff. And I did this stuff when I was in college and it felt so good then. So it was just kind of like this wonderful, like coming home to my body.
So then it sounds like your relationship with building the physical strength like changes your psychological relationship with a lot of things, like with aging, with your capability, with your function.
Yeah.
Like how powerful is that? Because you're right. Even people, I wasn't into athletics as a young person. So I just kind of found it later in life, but I equally see many dudes, for example, who I know a guy, had interest from the Yankees for the major leagues when he was in college, and he ended up being an engineer. And, you look at him 10 years later, you would have no clue, right? Because he just got into that world. He stopped lifting, he stopped being active. And so you kind of lose it. How powerful is that connection, that identity, especially for women?
Oh, it's everything. It's everything. It gives you a core sense of capability and confidence and feeling like you can take care of yourself. And the wonderful thing is, like, now that I'm a mom, I love that my daughters can see me doing this stuff in the basement and they don't think it's weird or anything. And they've like started kind of picking up a dumbbell or whatever and like becoming interested in doing it with me. And so, like, I'm not going to say they do a whole lot. They get bored very quickly, but at least they're like, they're kind of like doing it with me and it's not weird for them and enjoying like coursing around some weights and stuff with their mom. Something I never got to do with my mom.
Yeah. Sound like they're having fun. That's the important thing at that age, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's an underrated thing is why I ask, because it's until you do it, you don't realize it. I mean, men and women, that for me, just the idea of doing this hard thing and getting better, there's a lot of things we can't control in our life, right?
Yeah.
But we can control that shaping our body. And then I think it really does shape our mind. So it's really powerful to hear what you've been through.
We're in our heads so much.
Yeah,
we're
in our heads.
We're in here so much. It's important, I think, to make yourself do something hard every day, to push yourself physically, to lift heavy things and put them down and do that again. Like, we did that many, many moons ago as like human beings. And it's part of like what makes us tick, like it's what makes us go. We shouldn't lose sight of that. It's a healthy thing, building your strength.
All right. So then thinking about the societal relationship we started with and the history and kind of the phase we're in now, we've seen the explosions of, for example, CrossFit. CrossFit started around 2010 to become really popular. Then we have things like Orange Theory and Curves was around for a while, right? Remember that? Are they still around? I don't know.
I think they're still around.
Bodybuilding, right? Which you exemplify, and powerlifting. So what's next? Like what's happening next? How do we get the message out? I mean, is this just a matter of women following the right content and going to the gym and just seeing how they feel? Like, do you have a system, a process, an approach that you'd recommend somebody, do? Or is it more on the food side first? Like, what are your thoughts there?
I think they go hand in hand. I think, starting to think about things that you want to change. So on the food front, maybe it's like, maybe you are snacking on, your kids' lunchbox treats, or maybe you're eating out too much. But find the one thing that you think you'd like to change and start there nutritionally. For workouts, I mean, I think, starting with body weight is if you have a body, you have a gym. You don't necessarily need to be lifting dumbbells. You can start light or start just getting used to the motion with your own body and starting in a corner of the house, picking 3 things. Maybe one day it's an upper body. Maybe the day 2, it's chapter 6 of my book actually gives you a nice way to frame your week and think about picking exercises and what to do on each day of the week. So I would, recommend starting. You don't have to know anything. So I would recommend starting there and think about joining a gym. Pick a place that is within easy reach of your house, that you're not going to be, driving 15 minutes or more, but, within, 10, 15-minute drive, and aim to go there, once or twice a week. Maybe it's like one day you do it at home, a couple days you do it at this gym, and just kind of like figure out your rhythm and see how that's working for you. And I think getting out of the house, I think it's good to have a setup at home, but I think getting out of the house is really important. I think it's great. I like seeing new people, meeting people, exchanging words with people. I think it's very healthy. It's something that I really underestimated, the power of community and, needing each other. So I think I'm a big believer that gyms and, workout spaces and studios can fulfill some of that for us.
I mean, it makes sense. The number one factor for well-being is relationships, right? Is having social network. And obviously you gave people a framework for a lot of flexibility here and some really good ideas, right? Like maybe you start at home, you maybe have the gym, maybe mix them both, right? People don't often think out of the box like that. Like, I don't have to do it all at the gym. I don't have to do it all with weights. I love your quote. If you have a body, you have a gym. Like, no, there's no excuse, but we're also not telling you like, yeah, you got to be all in on day one and be training with this massive, lifting program. Chapter 6 of your book, like you said, has some structure. I love that because one of the first things people, when they ask me like, how should I train? And I start to give them principles and they're like, okay, what do I do with that? And it's like, okay, here's a simple program that'll get you started. And then we can tie that back to the principles that Anne Marie talked about today and training hard and putting putting effort into it and making it count. Because why waste the time? Like you're there to get some work done.
Right.
Awesome. All right. So really good things, really empowering. Is there anything you wish I had asked that we didn't cover on this topic? I'm sure there's a few things, but anything that comes to mind that you wanted to answer?
No, I mean, I would just, for women in particular, I would just, don't underestimate your strength. You are an athlete. You have always been one. Even if you think you're not, you are. You multitask like nobody's business. Our bodies are incredible. We bring life into the world. We live longer than men. We are so strong, stronger than men in a lot of ways that, we didn't talk about, but that.
You mean like childbirth?
That, but also, just
hormones
like in this day and age when we're obsessed with longevity, how interesting is it that since the dawn of time across all cultures, women have lived longer than men? Mm-hmm. We still don't understand really why. And that's because, we don't study women enough. We tend to study men. In terms of muscularity, women have different types of muscle fiber, more of quick response.
Like power, explosiveness, yeah.
Right.
But women have more endurance. Yeah.
And we're able to withstand and endure more than men. So, I mean, just women are like incredibly strong in ways that we don't give ourselves enough credit for. So build and capitalize on that strength and stop trying to whittle yourself down. Power yourself, build yourself, and you're so worth it.
You are. And I've been surprised myself how many women, when they lift and kind of show me their recoverability and their ability to push reps and volume, like there is an edge that women have with recoverability and volume, which almost means like you might have to even work a little hard in the gym sometime because you can handle more, which is fascinating. Yeah. So you said you are an athlete and I've always been one. We're going to leave it at that. That's a beautiful quote. Where do you want listeners to learn more about you, Anne Marie, and your work? Besides a book, which I will definitely link in there, as well as your Substack. So I've already got you covered there.
Oh, good. My website is annemariechaker.com, and it's Chaker. Anne was an E, so ANNE, mariechaker.com, to learn more about who I am and what I'm doing and what I'm writing about.
Awesome. We'll include that and all the other links in there. Thank you again. This is a fun topic. I know we just barely scratched the surface. You guys pick up her book if you want to learn a lot more and nerd out on that, or check her out on other podcasts as well. Anne Marie, thank you so much for taking your time and being on Wits and Weights.
Thank you, Philip.